But Puff grabbed me by both of my arms. He said, Gene, we gotta pray. We gotta pray. And I pushed the hands off me and I said, pray for what? That.
For decades, we've heard the whispers, the theories, the late-night arguments about who really pulled the strings behind Biggie's assassination. But nothing compares to what Gene Deal has just put on the table. And this isn't some dusty 90s conspiracy resurfacing. This is unfolding right now. As Diddy sits in a prison cell with his empire collapsing and former allies turning on him with alleged proof, Deal didn't hedge his words or imply anything quietly. He outright accused Diddy of orchestrating the sale of Biggie's entire legacy. His music, publishing, and name, while Biggie's mother, Valletta Wallace, was dying in hospice. Let that sink in. The woman who buried her son and spent decades protecting his legacy was allegedly betrayed in her final days by the very man she had long suspected. Even more disturbing, Deal claims the reported $150 million from that deal didn't go to Biggie's children, Faith Evans, or the family he left behind, but instead flowed to executives Diddy installed. Names like Wayne Barrow and Mark Pitts, figures unfamiliar to the public but central to those who knew Biggie, the same people who allegedly took control the moment the bullets stopped flying in Los Angeles. That's not random timing, and it's not business as usual. It's being described as a calculated heist hiding in plain sight.
The whole thing about it is you got to understand, I'm not that dude that you could talk to and have that kind of conversation with you. It wasn't about pay. They needed me more than I needed them. They needed me because they felt safe because I worked for Chaz Williams from Black.
Things get even messier because this isn't just about money. It's about timing. Diddy didn't suddenly decide to reveal these secrets out of nowhere. It all unfolded after Netflix released The Reckoning, the 4-part documentary his team claims is a hit piece but clearly acted as a trigger. The moment Misa Hilton, Biggie's ex and the mother of his first son, Justin, spoke out about the harassment she and her son faced after the documentary aired, Diddy came out swinging. His response wasn't merely defensive. It was a full-blown counterattack, flipping the narrative by asking how he could be harassing her when he claimed he had always been her protector, before dropping the bombshell about the publishing sale. Coincidence, or the moment someone finally called his bluff? Misa's post quickly disappeared, as if she realized she'd stirred a hornet's nest and didn't want the fallout. But the damage was already done. The conversation was no longer just about Biggie's death. It became about who has been profiting from it and why. Now that Diddy is locked up and his reputation is in ruins, the truth seems to be finally crawling out of the shadows.
But I was like, Paul came to me and said, yo, Gene, what's wrong? I said, that Paul. He said, no, dog, he just was hit. It's trauma. I said, pissed and himself.
But the story doesn't stop with Biggie. It circles right back to Tupac Shakur and that night in Las Vegas. To the diss track that allegedly sent Diddy into such a rage he put a price on Shakur's head. This isn't some back alley rumor either. It's tied to court filings and a secretly recorded interview between Keefe D and LAPD detectives, where Diddy's name is mentioned 47 times and Keefe claims Diddy was both terrified of Suge Knight and furious over Hit 'Em Up, to the point he was willing to pay millions to make sure they both ended up dead. What makes it even wilder is that Keefe didn't just tell police. He bragged about it, saying Diddy was so shaken after the track dropped that he couldn't even look Tupac in the eye when they later crossed paths. That's not just a rap beef. That's a man who felt exposed, who knew the line "you claim to be a player, but I fucked your wife" wasn't just a lyric but a public confession. And it all comes back to the alleged meeting in the House of Blues parking lot, where Keefe says Diddy looked like a man who'd seen a ghost. Someone who knew the walls were closing in and that the streets never forget.
I knew that somebody was going to that night. Somebody was going to get shot.
Now let's connect the dots, because this isn't just about two rap legends and the bullets that ended their lives. It's about the industry and the men who shaped Diddy himself. Andre Harrell, Russell Simmons, and Clive Davis, figures Diddy claims taught him how power really works, allegedly showed him that success wasn't just about hits or platinum plaques, but about control, about making sure no one could touch you no matter what you did. And he didn't just absorb those lessons. He perfected them, turning Bad Boy into a machine that kept the money flowing even as bodies dropped. The profits went to him and his inner circle, while the people who actually deserved it, Biggie's children, his widow, and the mother who buried her son only to watch his legacy get sold off, were left out in the cold. That's not business, it's theft. And the wildest part is that Diddy was still filming himself just days before the FBI kicked in his door, as if he knew the end was coming and was desperate to control the narrative one last time, still believing he could spin the story and somehow come out on top.
But you know, a lot of evidence points to it having been very much planned out.
But the question hanging over all of this is impossible to ignore. If Diddy really had a hand in Biggie's assassination, if he truly put a bounty on Tupac Shakur, and if he turned friends into enemies while transforming his empire into a crime scene, then what else has he been hiding all these years? The Reckoning isn't just a documentary. It's a leak, packed with footage Diddy never wanted the public to see, including conversations with his lawyers where he's allegedly begging for a way out and discussing the dirtiest business as if it were routine. Netflix isn't backing down either, insisting the material was obtained legally and that this isn't revenge, but the truth finally surfacing. So the real question becomes, who do we believe? The man sitting in prison after spending decades reshaping the narrative, or the voices who are only now finding the courage to tell the story as it really happened?
Filed during the 4th of July holiday, John Doe claims Biggie's son was among a group of men who lured him to a Revolt TV location in 2020 via a Combs Corporation vehicle, where he says he was then ambushed and led to another room where Diddy was waiting.
And let's not forget, this isn't just about the past. It's about right now. While Diddy sits in a cell as lawsuits stack up and the world watches his collapse like the final season of a trashy reality show, one crucial question still hangs unanswered. Who controls Biggie's legacy? Who decides the fate of his music, his name, and his story? Because if the alleged $150 million deal is real, then someone is about to get obscenely rich off a dead man's genius. And if that isn't one of the greatest tragedies in hip-hop history, it's hard to imagine what is.
But I used to be hurt because I knew the people that she had around her was Puff Boys. So we could never connect like that. So only time I tried to connect with Miss Wallace is when she needed me and she used Perry Sanders to call me.
But the part that won't let go is how this saga feels less like distant history and more like a horror movie unfolding in real time. Diddy didn't just survive the 90s. He thrived, turning grief into gold, rumors into power, and ensuring that no matter what the streets whispered, he always landed on top, until suddenly he didn't. The videos surfaced, the lawsuits piled up, the women he hurt found their voices, the men who worked for him started talking, and the documentary dropped. And now we're expected to believe the arrests, convictions, and betrayals are just bad luck or coincidence. Or is this what happens when the monster you helped create finally turns on you? Because Diddy didn't just fall. He was pushed by the same system that built him, by the same people who stayed silent for years, and by an industry that let him get away with it for far too long. And the most chilling part is that this still feels like only the first layer, the first domino, because if his empire was built on Biggie's death and Tupac Shakur's assassination, on secrets and silence, then what happens when the last secret spills, the final NDA expires, and the last loyal soldier turns? That's the bomb still ticking in the air.
Miss Wallace is a strong lady. You know what I'm saying? Miss Wallace, you know, she, and I'm not saying because she's Jamaican, you know, or anything like that, that she got that down home, like she is about her business.
Because this was never just about charges, convictions, lawsuits, or even a prison sentence. It was about control, the kind that doesn't just bend people to your will but rewires them, making them forget what they saw, what they knew, and what they should have done. And to understand how deep it runs, you don't start in a courtroom, you start at the parties, the so-called freak-off parties Diddy hosted like they were routine, even though they were anything but. These weren't just nights of excess. They were additions. Rooms packed with A-listers, hidden cameras, and one unspoken rule carved in stone. No one says no to Diddy. And if you think that was just about power, you're missing the point, because according to Gene Deal, these gatherings weren't random at all. They were tradition, a twisted ritual tied to the anniversary of Biggie's death. Less a celebration than a victory lap, a silent reminder to everyone in the room of who won the war and who still believed he always would.
So we got the person that's accusing Diddy of tossing a semen-soaked Notorious B.I.G. shirt on him that's claiming that Diddy had a notable accomplice acting as a henchman during a separate sexual assault.
Now sit with that for a moment, because if Gene Deal is telling the truth, if Diddy really turned Biggie's death into an annual spectacle, then this goes far beyond grief and straight into ownership. This wasn't a man simply mourning a friend. It was someone monetizing a memory, converting pain into power. The so-called freak-off parties weren't just about excess or indulgence. They were a display, a message to the world, and especially to the West Coast, that no matter what happened in Los Angeles or who fell in Vegas, he was still standing and still in control. And if you were in that room, laughing, drinking, playing along, you weren't a bystander, you were part of the machine, complicit in it, because in Diddy's world there were only two roles: players and pawns.
When she mentioned my name, my fraternity brother, Bill Willard, was right there and said, yo, that's my fraternity brother, Gene Deal. I know him, I could call him right now. I went up to see Miss Wallace, brother. And she took me around her whole house, and I seen the memorial of Big.
But this is where it turns even darker, because those parties weren't just about Biggie. They were about silence, about making sure no one ever spoke and no one ever remembered what really happened. For years, it worked. Lawsuits were settled, rumors were buried, and the industry moved on until it couldn't anymore. Until jurors saw the text messages between Diddy and Cassie, heard witnesses describe the rules of those parties, and realized the man on trial wasn't just accused of crimes, but of erasing people, their voices, their choices, and their dignity. And even then, the jury didn't convict him on everything, walking away confused and divided, like they'd watched a magic trick without understanding how it was done, with one juror reportedly admitting they expected more because they knew there was more to the story. That's the pattern of Diddy's downfall. It wasn't just the law catching up to him, but the years-long system he built to stay untouchable, turning accusations into narratives, victims into characters, and crimes into legend. And that brings us to The Reckoning, the documentary his team calls a hit piece and Netflix defends as truth, because this isn't just a show. It's the trial he never fully faced in court, where the jury isn't 12 people in a box but all of us, and the evidence isn't just testimony, it's footage, his own. The same footage he obsessed over for decades, believing it would protect him, now shows him days before his arrest in a hotel room begging his lawyer for a way out, talking about finding someone willing to work in the dirtiest of dirty business. Not the words of an innocent man, but of someone who knows the walls are closing in. And the wildest part is that he filmed himself the entire time, as if he still believed he could control the story even as it slipped through his fingers.
Without that. And then us coming up, 50 and everybody, what you made think they get bulletproof trucks for?
But let's not pretend this story is only about Diddy, because if this saga has taught us anything, it's that no one here is clean. Not the executives, not the artists, and not even those claiming to want justice. Take 50 Cent, for example. The executive producer of The Reckoning, a longtime rival who's been waiting for this moment and now finds himself holding the microphone, deciding how the story gets told. Coincidence or careful calculation? He didn't stumble into this position. He positioned himself to be standing there when Diddy finally fell. And Netflix isn't just airing a documentary, they're weaponizing it, insisting this isn't revenge but truth, even as it feels less like exposure and more like a takedown, as if someone has been collecting receipts and biding their time, ready to drop the hammer. Then there's Misa Hilton, the woman who stood beside Diddy in the 90s, the mother of his first child, who appeared at his trial like a ghost from the past, spoke out about the harassment she and Justin faced after the documentary aired, then deleted the post as if she'd said too much, only to now be handed her own platform to tell her story. And the question isn't whether she deserves it, it's why now. Is this about setting the record straight or about survival? Because if there's one constant in Diddy's world, it's that loyalty always comes with a price, and right now that price is everything.
What was the backstory behind that, Big Mom calling you?
My man, that had to be, if I say exhilarating, it has to be one highlights of coming out here.
So let's ask the real question. Who else knew? Who else was in those rooms, at those parties, in those closed-door meetings, and chose to stay silent? Because this was never just about Diddy. It was about the system that protected him, the industry that looked the other way, the friends who turned into enemies, and the enemies who suddenly became witnesses. And the most terrifying part is that we're still only seeing the tip of the iceberg. If Diddy's empire was built on secrets, then this documentary isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning, the first domino already falling while the next one teeters. Because there are still others we haven't talked about yet. The ones not in prison, not named in documentaries, still working, still powerful, still pretending none of this ever happened. The executives, producers, and artists whose careers were built inside Diddy's machine, the ones who saw things, knew things, and maybe even did things. And if this downfall has taught us anything, it's that the truth never stays buried forever. It waits, it ferments, and when it finally surfaces, it doesn't take down just one man. It drags everyone with him. Diddy may be behind bars, the documentary may be out, the lawsuits may be piling up, and some version of the truth may finally be coming into the light, but monsters are never created alone. Someone feeds them, protects them, enables them, and those people are still out there, still hiding. So the real question isn't just who Diddy was, but who's next, what are they afraid of, and when the next shoe drops, and it will, whose names will be on the receipts. Think about it, talk about it, because this story is far from over. The king may be down, but the pawns are still moving. The board is far from empty, and we'll be watching.